Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of SuperFantaFi. This being a show, it's about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the Bulgasal Immortal Souls finale. A great, beautiful, amazing finale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I like that and I think it's very befitting that this episode is split down the middle the way it is. Basically, the first half of the episode is finally giving us the full context, the full story of what went down 1,000 years ago. And then you add in the context of the back half of the episode is about resolving everything present day and everything kind of coming full circle in so many different regards. Obviously, we now get the understanding of like, okay, so Siho and Do-yeon in a previous life were siblings, which is interesting and beautiful how that works out, where, right, they became 400 years down the line, they would eventually become mother and son, and then eventually will become borderline siblings again like they are present day. But their parents were being hunted by someone. Doesn't seem like it was a monster, it's just probably like, right, some lords of that time probably like burning villages and stuff like that. And they escaped. And she ended up meeting Sanghan back then, who scared the guy off. And she ended up dropping them off with none other than Miss Lee. It's like, oh, the connections, they run so deep. So she raised them like they were her own children, which, funny enough, present day, they ended up being essentially that too. I thought it was like, oh man, it all comes full circle. And, obviously, we got more context to why Hwal was the way he was. He was very obsessed with her. And understandably, what I think is, you could trace a lot of things going wrong back in the past. I can't 100% say it all falls on one particular person. Olte ends up taking a good brunt of that fault, because he is the one that killed his brother. Siho and Do-yeon back then saw him kill his sibling, but I don't know he knew that the Bulgasal was with them, and he knew this was an opportunity to blame it on a monster, but he also used this as an opportunity to probably get rid of the only witnesses to what he did. But, you know, the reason why Olte was the way he was, it was a byproduct of, like, yeah, my father doesn't love me. I'm kind of the bastard first son, the weak son. He loves his second son, which, ironically enough, plays out, through and through, because who does that somewhat pseudo second son become, and ends up being Hwal when he got resurrected as a human, and even present day, like, Hwal still filled that role of, like, the second son. He was always that bastard of a sick and weak son. It's like, oh, my second son always takes after me type of situation. So, there's that element to it. And so, but Sanghan, rather than spending time with Hwal, she spent so much time looking over Siho and Do-yeon back then, even checking in on them, and even eventually becoming a part of their family. Obviously, Miss Lee, Hye Seok wasn't the biggest like fan at first, but it's still like, no, you care for them, you're helpful to them, so she stayed around and became a part of the family. And it's like, right, if you're going in the village, stay covered up, because they'll notice that you haven't aged. That despite everything that she is, she's still a part of the family, so it made her feel complicated. And it was almost beautiful, too. It's sad, actually, and maybe it's almost befitting that Hwal ended up killing a lot of people then, right? So in the next life, she is this shaman who's like, oh, those cursed by Bulgasal killed this child. Now it makes a little sense why that kind of transpired the way it did. But what happened present day, she took Hwal in just like she did Sanghan. And even then, she also took Sanghan in too, despite knowing what her and Hwal's connection was and everything. And it was beautiful in so many reciprocal ways. But once again, it's just Olte's need to, get back at his dad. I don't know whether his sole intention was, I'm going to send you guys there so that you will die. I want you to suffer like I've suffered. Like, I will never be good enough for you, Dad. So I don't know if it was a combination of either way it wins. Either you kill the monster and I pointed you in the right direction and you'll kind of love me, or the monster will end up killing you. Well, because also if you kill the monster, you also end up killing all the witnesses to what I did too. So there's that. But also because they never fully saw Ulte's face, so they couldn't pinpoint him. He made sure not to be there during that attack when they went to kill Sangon back then. So, and even given the opportunity, she never fought back because she had made a promise to Siho that she wouldn't harm a human. And just like eventually Hual would make that promise to Quan 400 years later, that, right, I will never drink human blood. And they both made a promise. And it's interesting, too, I guess they never bothered really, like, they learned the language and understood enough, but I guess they never spoke, because Hual and Sangon communicated, like, psychically. I think it's a very special, I think their bonds as Bulgasal was very different from what his was with Ulte. It's like, no, we were Bulgasals. We never really get into how they became Bulgasals. Maybe they were just born Bulgasals. Like, this is the life they've only ever known. And that also plays into why, once again, why Hual did what he did. Because, right, I show up here, these humans are hurting you, so I killed everyone. Even those who weren't really necessarily involved, they were just nearby villagers who were like, yo, don't burn down this house. Like, why are you hurting them? They've been nothing but good people. I would assume, yeah, because I think Hual made that whole point last episode, that same mountain where everything went down 600 years ago, and then him growing up and everything is also the place where everything went down 1,000 years ago. So it all takes place, it all plays out, and it all comes back to that general area. So Hual was just trying to protect the woman he loved, but it's like, right, because he never thought much of humans. It's like, oh, these pathetic things hurt you, and then, like, she's looking like, and he doesn't understand. It's like, why are you mad at me, Sangon? Like, these humans are trying to hurt you, but the problem is, when he did what he did, he hurt the people she cared about. Siho had a wound on her neck. Hia Siok, Miss Lee, ended up dead because of his arrival. His appearance, and he ended up killing everyone else. Lo and behold, who also popped up? Captain Ham. He ended up being the one he's one of the people that stabbed Sangon in the back, but nothing they did would kill her, so they were like, right, we're going to behead her and dismember her body and, like, scatter it all around. Let's see if she'll recover from this or not. But Hual showed up and killed everyone, but it broke Sangon's heart as she started to cry for the first time. And even she was almost taken back, but like, wait, I'm crying. Because that was her family. These are people she cared about, hurt by the men that she once loved. And so all three of Siho, Duyan, and Quan end up stabbing him. And then in the process, she ends up stabbing herself, trying to kill herself to protect them. But not before he cursed them. And now it all comes full circle. He's the reason why Quan will always be in a position to lose an arm in any life. It's because of that. It's like, right, this arm of yours that's covered in blood, you'll lose it. Your sight, you will always be born blind. And that comes, like, that's why he started working with Ulte, because Ulte recovered healed his eyes. Like, I wonder, like, it makes you wonder, like, Ulte he's known the full story since the beginning. So when he took Duyan in, it wasn't just, oh, you're Hual's son, from 600 years ago. You're also someone connected to all of this from 400 years ago. So that is maybe he didn't really recognize him back then. It's hard to say, because he never really pinpointed on that. He always focused on, like, right, you were Achan in a previous life. You were Hual's son. That's why I always kept you close. Because the curse had already been activated by the time he left, but he must have known on some level that it was Hual's curse on them that made it so that Duyan. But once again, him being blind and Ulte being able to kind of come and help him, and, you know, making the promise of, oh, I'll help your brother. So that all kind of comes around. I mean, it's also the tragedy of Hual having him and Siho having a son who ended up being blind, and you blamed yourself. It was kind of more your fault than you realized. You're thinking, like, oh, because I was cursed by Bulgasal. It's like, no, because you were Bulgasal and you cursed him in a previous life. It's just, and he's also the reason why Siho can never really have children, is because the curse is what is like, right, you will never give birth to a child. Like, I think it was a special exception with Duyan, because it was almost like those curses kind of culminated and kind of canceled each other out. But that's why, like, their second child ended up dying before she was really born. So that's when Ote shows up and is like, right, I want to become powerful. He was tired of being weak and seen as less than. That's why he killed his brother out of jealousy. He set this all up out of jealousy and anger and feeling like he wasn't good enough. So, and I think that ends up being a core to his character. He presents himself such a certain way, and it almost plays into the fact is, what does he do present day? He's got all these people in his pocket because he enjoys the power, being Bulgasal, being the strongest name, being this immortal, being able to have so many people's lives. Like, everything's working towards Hawal, what Hawal wanted in the end, but it is also him feeling a voiding side of himself in more ways than one, both because of the literal hole in his chest that can never be filled, but also him never feeling like he's ever good enough. But he thought, like, if I could do this, Hawal will be mine. And it's like, yeah, I respect this person. I love this person because they made me powerful. He gave me everything. And once I fulfill what he wants, he'll fill this hole in my heart and I'll be fully complete again. So, and it ended up setting everything in motion. And obviously because Hawal ended up dying as a human, Sangan ended up surviving. And it also adds context to why she protected him in the future lives, because despite, eventually 600 years later when he was growing up, the reason why she did is because she cared for him, because at one point in time, you were my kindred spirit, you were my other. And so given the opportunity, she would protect him. And even at one point in time, he ended up protecting her. Because I think when she saw Hawal like that, when she saw him kind of innocent and seeing this defensive, like this person who he had become, I think it made her go like, I don't know if she had given up on any of her anger. Because at that moment, it is a situation of, maybe that's why in the end she also cursed him too, because she was probably giving him a chance, like, right, I will give you a chance to live your life, but what does he do? Come full circle as, all right, you're hurting me again. You hurt me before, and now you hurt me. It's like, cool, I'll become a human and I'll curse you now. Because at the time she didn't know, 1,000 years ago, she didn't know Hawal died as a human. She just knew that she was alive, so she's like, oh, maybe he survived and he'll come find me. That's why she was waiting in the cave, as Ote ends up saying later. So maybe the plan was to wait till he got back there and finally end all this and kill him. So, and he also had, tragically, Du-Yun tried to, stop them before they got away, Ote and Hawal, but Quan ended up stabbing him. He's like, I'm sorry, I had to protect my son. Maybe in the next life, if we ever meet again, you'll forgive me. And that was kind of like his final thoughts when it came to Siho. All that death and destruction, so much. And I'm sure a lot of those villagers that died were some of the same villagers that would eventually, 600 years later, want Hawal dead. It's almost, once again, it's the tragedy of this all. And so we get to where we are present day. Hawal having drunk his father's blood, and now you have Ote in the process of becoming human again, but he doesn't want to become human again. He's like, I've gone too far, I've done too much, I became powerful, I don't ever want to backtrack to becoming a weak, pathetic human again. I never want to be who I was again. I'm going to remain powerful. So eventually, I guess he ended up killing all of those same people again in that general area, in that village. He ended up killing all of them, drinking their blood, because when he eventually crosses paths with Hawal, he wants Hawal to drink his blood, because that way you'll remember everything. You'll fully, because not drinking human blood, if he had ever drunk human blood before now, it probably would have sent him down that path. But luckily, the only blood he drunk was the tiny bit that Quan gave him. And it's like, right, that's not enough to fully send him on the edge, but it's borderlining there, because truth be told is he only needed 2 more people's blood. Du-Yun and Siho. Like, if he had gotten their blood, which he eventually would have, with the bloodlust that he had. But even Ote was like, right, you've tasted human blood now. There's no going back. That will control you. He's like, yeah, at first you kind of beat yourself up about it, but eventually it gets easier and easier until, like, you think nothing of it. So if he had probably gotten Siho and Du-Yun's blood, it probably would have been automatically, it would have been on. He would have automatically went back to being that Bulgasal again. And so Ote was like, right, feed on me and become that person again. Don't you want to be that person again? Then together we can kill that woman. But for Hawal, it's like, right, I don't want to. I don't want to live as the Bulgasal I was. I want to live as the human I was. And that's the problem that Ote never took into consideration. what being human again meant to him, you know? And maybe given the opportunity, if Ulte ever became human again, maybe things would play out differently for him. But I think in the end, for Hawal, his experiences throughout this life, everything he experienced from being human to becoming a Bulgasal and adhering to his father to never drink human blood, all of that, searching for Sangan over all these years, like having a wife, having a child, like everything he went through molded him into being a better version of himself than he was 1,000 years ago. And that's what Ulte never really took into consideration. He's like, right, I thought your revenge would be enough to drive you, and it was. But even look at his revenge against Sangan, what that eventually turned into despite everything, you know? And it was heartbreaking too. That's where the tears started for me, was when Sangan's going to Quan, and you know, it's like, right, leaving the picture in his hand. She's like, I promise you I'll come back for you. I won't leave you here alone. She's like, I'm sorry I ran away and only saved myself. But she's like, I've got to end this. So she goes to help Hawal, and in order to protect her from being killed by Ulte, he ends up drinking all of Ulte's blood. And I was scared. I was like, damn, he's going back to himself, so Sangan's going to have no choice but to kill him. I was like, is she going to end up becoming Bulgasal again just to save him? Like, I mean, the whole plan was like to bounce back and forth with it, but given the opportunity, because Ulte's like, right, it's too late. There's no going back now. He's coming like who he was before. But still holding on to his humanity, Hawal kills himself, because I'd rather die and end all of this, you know. But Sangan was like, we were supposed to do this together. And this is, once again, the tears. This is where I legitimately started choking up. That everything from then on, I started choking up. I was tears rolling down my face. I felt like something was caught up in my throat, like I was just choking up that much. Because I think it's so sad and beautiful at the same time, everything culminating in this moment. His experiences, him apologizing for what, he's like, you said, like, what happened 1,000 years ago doesn't matter, but he's like, it does. You know, if I had never come looking for you, none of this would have happened. Du-Young wouldn't have gotten cursed. Quan wouldn't have gotten cursed. You wouldn't have had to go through the pain you were going through. Miss Lee wouldn't have to go. Like, none of this would be happening. He's like, this is on me. I loved you and cared about you so deeply, and I was selfish, and I wanted you to myself. Because his worry was like, right, you becoming so attached to these humans, you'll leave me. But Sangan was like, no, I'll come back. She's like, once the kids are grown, then I'll come back. And she never did. And so that's why he came looking for her, because so many years he spent alone. Ironically enough, in his mind at the time, she ended up being the one that took everything away from him, being responsible for his entire family dying. So it's like, right, he did that to her, quote unquote, she did it to him, but she never did. And I think it makes sense, because if she ever did do that, she'd be repeating the tragedy of what he did to her all those years ago. And right, she would have never killed Siho and Du-Young. Like, we now know that. She would have never done that in that new life. She would have seen them for who they were and would have never hurt them. But it was also for the sake of Ulte, you know, fulfilling the promise he made to Hawal all those years ago. But for Hawal, it's like, right, I'm the one that started all this. If I can end this, because I don't want to, if I keep living, for one, he also knows I can't guarantee that this bloodlust situation will be controllable, whatever hurt the people I care about, which includes you, includes Sangan, which also that includes Siho and Du-Young. I don't want to do that. Plus, if I die, I'm the origin of this curse. If I break this curse, everyone, you, Miss Lee, Quan, Siho, Du-Young, you'd all be able to live happy lives. I think everyone that has a connection to Wall, they're the main people, but I think everyone else that's trapped in this cycle, all the villagers, even his biological dad and mom, would have all, even Captain Ham, would have all been broken free of this cycle that they've been playing, like, caught up in, swooped up in for the past 1,000 years. This is his way to help and save everyone. You know, he wants them to be able to live a happy life. And as I write, go live and be back with your sister and Du-Young. And as long as you guys are all alive, then any sacrifice is necessary. And Sanggon's begging him. It's like, fine, I will find you again. But he's like, right, Bulgasals don't reincarnate. She's like, I don't care. As the king of the underworld, just come back. And she's like, I will find you. After everything we've been through, after you spend so long finding me, of course I'll do the same for you. And him dying in her arms like that, you know, it was heartbreaking. And her calling up Siho and Dooyeon, and then them breaking down like, Otae's dead. But it's like, what would that mean about Hall? What about Detective Kwan? And them breaking down and holding each other, it tore me apart. And then for Sanggon to die around, I mean, Jesus, Siho just she lost her mom, her sister. Now she's losing her other sister. She lost Hwal. She lost Miss Lee. She lost Detective Kwan. All of that, and it breaks your heart, you know? But it's like, Sanggon's like, right, Detective Kwan, like, he can't be alone, so I'm going to show you where he's going. And she's able to look into his soul, which obviously makes sense that even 1,000 years ago, I guess I shouldn't have been too surprised, but she's always had that ability. And she looks in Sanggon's soul and sees basically the ending of everything, where Kwan is, what happened at the end of it all. There even is a tragedy to it, and you feel a little bad for him to some extent. It's Otae, that his final words like, help me, Father. Because even at the end, despite all that you've done, despite everything, you were still his son. He died and probably not knowing that you were responsible for killing his other son. That probably would have affected some things, but he still wanted to protect you nevertheless, even if you were helping this monster escape. Because at the end of the day, you were his son, and sadly, your dad wasn't around to help you anymore. That's why he was always kind of reluctant about hurting Kwan, because, like, right, despite everything, despite our history, you are my father. But once again, this father still ended up choosing the second son over you, the first. Once again, he doesn't remember, but still. And I think Siho and Dooyeon never probably ever found out what they meant to Hwal. And probably never even got to know what they meant to Sanggon in a previous life. But the tragedy of that, you know. But they're going to stay in the house, the one that they all, like, moved into, and, like, where that original, like, quote-unquote family photo was taken. That's where they're going to, the second house, and not the house that Hwal had been staying in by himself, that Miss Lee would visit from time to time. It's like, right, we're going to stay in this house, and we'll wait for Hwal and Sanggon to come back, because it's just like Hwal says, that people who are bound together, are bound to, like, who are connected like that, are bound to, like, run into each other. Like, they're kind of tied by fate. And Siho agrees with that. And so we get, you know, time skips throughout their life. Dooyeon playing the role of the uncle, going back to school, watching Siho's daughter grow up, and watching their family expand. Dooyeon eventually gets married, and just more people in the labs around the table while she stayed there. And even her daughter at one point in time is like, right, Mom, why are you still staying here? You should move in with me. But she wanted to keep up her promise of, like, yeah, I'm going to look after this place. My thing is, with the very ending, the last time skip we saw was like, okay, this is 50 years later. Right, that's where I got messed up. Because I was thinking, like, for whatever reason, I was thinking, like, oh, this is 30 years later. And, well, I kept thinking, like, I think in my head, I was thinking, like, oh, that's 50. It's saying 50 years later, as in it's 30 years plus 20 equaling 50. I think that's where I kind of got confused for a second, but it's like, no, it's another 50 years later. And the woman, at first I was like, oh, is that supposed to be Siho? But it's like, no, that's most likely, like, Siho's daughter who's older. Like, oh, and she probably passed on that mission. Probably Dooyeon did the same for his family. Keep looking for Sanggon and Hwal, and they ultimately end up finding him. And we see her not working at a laundromat, but somewhere else. And she gets the address to the house, and obviously, the place is very, very old, and doorknob breaks when she goes in. But the moment she goes in, and she eventually runs into Hwal, I'm like, yes! Because at first I was heartbroken, though. I'm like, man, it's like, it sucks because you guys won't ever be together. Because I was still, once again, idiotically under the impression that it was only like, okay, it's been 50 years altogether. Like, once again, I don't know why. I was thinking the older lady was Sung-on. And I was like, right, she's older now, so it'll take forever for you guys to eventually meet again. That's what I was worried about. And I was like, oh, man, that's going to suck. But then, because of the photo at the end, which I'll get to in a second, but it clarified a lot, especially when I sat there and thought about it. But Hawal and her meeting again like that, and the moment his hand gets cut, they're almost like, oh, hey, and she tries to get away and ends up like falling, and he grabs her, but ends up cutting his hand on a pot. And the moment he goes into the bathroom to wash it sparks something in him. Because obviously, like, the scar, I don't think we got to see a good look at his back of his hand, but I don't think it's there anymore. But I think it was just supposed to be symbolic of, right, the scar that you had. And the moment Sanggon comes back, and he was like, wait, have we met before? And all of a sudden, a tear rolls down her face. Because I think that already happened the moment she saw the place, and I think her memory started coming back in that moment. And I don't know if his did, but maybe just somewhere deep down inside, they both remember to some level. And then we get the photo at the end, which immediately in my brain, I'm like, oh, isn't that just the photo? It's like, but then the angle was different. I was like, I didn't really get it. Because at first I was like, I'd like to believe that maybe this time around, Detective Kwan is your dad. Like, that's what he always wanted. He's like, right, 600 years ago, maybe I'll be reborn. Maybe in another life, you'll actually be, in the next life, you'll actually be my biological son. You will actually be my blood son. And I think this time around it was. Because I kept looking at the photo. I was like, yeah, the photo's from a different angle, plus Kwan's beard is dyed. And I was like, right, because they are together. That photo is from that present day moment. From that, like, that time skip of, like, right, Hawal and Sanggon found each other and they're all together again. I want to believe that that means Detective Kwan is Hawal's dad, and just like Sanggon ended up in this life dyeing his beard and his hair and his mustache like she promised, and he even said, like, yeah, maybe in the next life, maybe you'll get to do it to me next time, and I think this time she did. So the way the table is set up, what I'm thinking is, Hawal is Kwan's son. Miss Lee, her children are Dooyeon, Siho, and Sanggon. I think they're all siblings. And I that just based on where the table was, I like to believe that. I'd almost been like, oh, it'd be kind of cute if, I mean, it still could be like, Miss Lee and Miss Lee and Kwan are together. Probably, I mean, maybe not. I don't know. But I think the division of the table kind of points out to whose family. And it's like, that notion of, like, yes, you finally are all together. It didn't take as long. It still did take a while, because if you add up all the time that was skipped, it was like over probably close to 100 years or whatever before they were finally, like, fully all together again. But they still were. And to me, that's just like, that's all I needed. That's all I needed to know, that they are together. Like I said, I wasn't 100% sure, but the more I sat on it, I was like, right, that's what that's got to be. So they found their way back to each other. You know, the dynamics may be a little different. Maybe this time, Siho and Dooyeon are back to being brother and sister again, you know, being blood related this time as well. But together they are this family, and I think, you know, Hawal and Sanggon are finally together too, but now it's just like, right, they're all bridged together by these people that mean the world to them, you know? So, I, sitting here talking about it again, I don't know if you can hear it, I'm getting choked up again. I want to cry again. God damn it, that ending, dude. And I'm because I wasn't sure whether this would be set up in a way where, like, oh, would there be a season 2? It's like, no. It's done. This is the ending. It's a beautiful, perfect ending. We don't get the full reunion. Like, we don't get to experience it. But that picture is enough to be like, they are together. This tragedy, this curse has been broken, and they're happy. And that I'd like to believe eventually down the line, they will always continue to find themselves over and over and over and over again throughout time infinite. That they will always be a family, and that they will always find their way to each other. That this is their fate and destiny to always be a family. So, like I said, I'm getting a little choked up again. And that in itself, that picture is all I needed to confirm that, you know, to feel that. So, once again, you kind of feel bad for Olte, but maybe, just maybe, he might get his second chance to be a better person. I think the whole monster angle is done, just because I think this last time when all the monsters ended up getting killed, because now it is a situation of the curse has been lifted. Yes, this was a curse brought about by a monster cursing Hawal all those years ago, but I think with the end result of all this, like, his curse wipes out every other curse, so I don't think you have to worry about, like, Sanggon getting chased after by some monsters. It's all done. Maybe those monsters now getting reincarnated or have an opportunity to start fresh too and be better people. And I'd like to believe Ote might get that opportunity too. So it is this beautiful, almost very much like Lost type of ending. Once again, you maybe feel a certain way about the way Lost ended. I enjoyed Lost's ending. I thought it was beautiful, but I can understand people's issues with how they got there essentially. So, but yeah, I thought this is just magnificent. I that's all I can say. I've been choked up by a lot of stuff, endings and stuff, but this one got me the most because it broke my heart. Just like, right, it ends so tragically, but the tragedy ended up turning out so beautifully that they might not have all their memories of everything, but they might not remember everything. Some of them may, and some of them may not, but at least they're family this time, and that's all I needed, so. Beautiful show, top to bottom, and once again, it didn't play out the way I thought. I mean, I guess in the end, it kind of played out what I thought the show was always going to be, but obviously there were some turns and developments, some laughs, some tears, plenty of tears, and some developments. It's just the show gave you everything, and I love it so much, and I'm glad, and I think it ends beautifully enough. It is one of those things where I never want anything to end. But I think at the end of it all, I think also because I recently watched something else that had a depressing ending and it just stayed kind of depressing. It ends on a very depressing note. This ends on a beautiful, hopeful note that it's like, right, you can just imagine like it's still going to stay beautiful and hopeful all the way through that. Once again, they're always going to find their way to each other. So I think this is kind of what I needed. Just, it's very cathartic, just push out all the tears, cry it out, man. I think, and I love this show, and I'm grateful for it, and I'm grateful for that ending. It's such a beautiful, beautiful ending, and so, like with any ending, I always have to say, to the cast, to crew, everyone involved, thank you for making an amazing show, a show with so much, once again, tragedy, but beauty, and heart, and love, and sadness, and there's just so much to it. Just every range of emotions to feel about the show. And I wish everyone involved, once again, cast and crew, the best with their future endeavors. And so we come to this moment at the end of all of these where you have to say that final goodbye to like a show, and it just, you don't want it to quite end, because the moment the recording stops, it's done. It officially ends then and there. But I've run my mouth enough. So till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.